you're not very tough on this, you're not willing to hold these people accountable. Have I got that right?
Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here. Ms. Serrano, if I could just start with you, I want to say a particular thank you to you for the work and the incredible work that you do when it comes to human trafficking, child trafficking in particular. I know that you were 18 years as a federal prosecutor handling child pornography and child exploitation offenses. Those are terrible crimes to have to prosecute. And I want to thank you for doing that, and thank you now for the work that you do with Operation Underground Railroad. I mean, it's just incredible. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit from your experience as a prosecutor and now as someone who is working to combat this epidemic of human trafficking, child sex trafficking in this country. It's a global epidemic, actually, but it's one, unfortunately, in this country, too. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you have seen in your experience about the connection between human trafficking and child pornography?
So human trafficking is a broad term that covers a bunch of different types of crimes, whether it's forced labor, et cetera. But within that, there's the sex trafficking. And oftentimes when you're dealing with sex trafficking of minors, part of the process to break down the victim or potentially advertise the victim to sex buyers, traffickers, or folks create child pornography, which are sexually explicit pictures of children under the age of 18. Likewise, the flip side is if someone as a young child has been sexually abused as a child, perhaps they were victims of CSAM, child sexual exploitation material, they may not have gotten the resources or aftercare, for example, that my organization provides to get them the help that they need. Unfortunately, they become very vulnerable to become trafficked. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg problem where sometimes one will influence or increase the other.
So let me ask you this. In terms of the children who are exploited in these images, is it fair to say that many of these children were sex trafficked, that they are trafficking victims themselves?
Of the ones that we can identify, sometimes, yes. The children that are depicted in the child pornography or CSAM images, some of them are trafficked, yes.
And what about the demand side of this? Because unfortunately, the reason that there is human trafficking of any kind, including sex trafficking in children, is because there's a demand for it. And in your experience, does child pornography help drive the demand for human trafficking and sex trafficking of children?
It can, yes. An argument that I would routinely make before district judges in my district would be, sometimes you have individuals who are looking at images online of child pornography. And then oftentimes that will not satiate their need for this material, and they'll go out and actually commit an offense. It's no different than you walk by, and this is a very simplistic analogy. You can walk by a bakery and smell the sugary, chocolate cake, but sometimes it gets to you so much you go in and buy a slice. Again, it's very simplistic. I'm not trying to make light of it, but that's a very simple analogy to explain it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for the incredible work that you do. Mr. Marshall, General Marshall, thank you for being here. You're a prosecutor. You have been, even before this role, which is a prosecutorial one, you were a district attorney. Let me just ask you, when you recommended sentences to judges, which you would do in your role as a prosecutor, did you base your recommendation on what you thought was necessary to keep the public safe?
Senator, absolutely, and also the egregious nature of the facts that we were dealing with.
So if you made a recommendation to a judge and that judge went 90% or more below your recommendation that you thought was necessary to keep the public safe, would you be worried about the effect that might have in terms of endangering members of the community?
Gravely concerned, not only as it related to the particular case, but also the message it sent to the community about how we would hold individuals personally accountable for crimes they commit.
So in other words, if you have a judge who consistently sentences, let's say in an area, let's say child pornography, below what the government is asking for, what guidelines are asking for, you're saying that the message that sends is that you're not very tough on this, you're not willing to hold these people accountable. Have I got that right?
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this. You said also, you sentence based on the gravity of the crime. When it comes to things like child exploitation and images that exploit children, would you say that if you have an offender who has thousands of images, that's probably worse than an offender who has one or two, and that you might want to sentence that offender with hundreds and thousands more than the person who has one or two? Is that a fair thing to say?
It's fair, and in fact, it's been my practice. As somebody that has tried and convicted those who traffic in child pornography, I've had a chance to be able to see those images, because one of the things that I also do as that advocate is for that child that is in that image that has been harmed as a result of what's taken place. And so not only do we want to be able to deter that conduct, but also we want to be able to be that voice for the voiceless in this case, and it's those children whose images are being trafficked.
Because they often, I mean, the kids who have been trafficked, their images have been used, they often don't have anybody to speak for them, right? I mean, you come into court, the judge has got to do justice. In a way, the judge has got to do justice by them, on behalf of them, because there's nobody to speak for them. And it's not like they don't get to prosecute the case, right? A lot of times we don't even know who these kids are. We can't find them. We can't help them. So it's really up to the court to do something on their behalf. Is that fair to say?
The court is the ultimate voice.
Yeah. I wish that Judge Jackson shared your perspective, General. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I want to apologize to Senator Hirono. I recognize Senator Booker, and she was next in line. I hope she will forgive me.
I forgive you.
Thank you. Now I recognize.
Well, if you're asking for forgiveness, I was supposed to read something into the record just to ask Senator Hirono. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund asks that we enter their report into the record. May I do that?
Go ahead.
I would like to ask for that to be entered into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you very
Not
much.
patient. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Captain Thomas, Noble's support for Judge Jackson is a powerful counter to the foundless charge that Judge Jackson is soft on crime. I thank all of you for being here. Congresswoman Beatty, we all know that Judge Jackson is eminently qualified. Her character, her integrity, her humanity, her kindness, her fairness, her leadership, these were qualities that were apparent from a really young age. And I thank Mr. Rosenthal for telling us about what she was as a young girl. It's an incredible story, and I really enjoyed listening to you. Congresswoman Beatty, as you listened to Judge Jackson yesterday, especially when she talked about her experience at Harvard and the need for perseverance, I was going to ask you whether you could relate to that, but clearly you could, and so could I. Do you think the message of perseverance is a powerful message, especially to Black women and girls in this country?
First of all, let me just say not only thank you for the question, but thank you for your service and what you represent. I think it is an extremely powerful and needed message that we send out to little girls, all little girls, but specifically those who are of color. And I think what you saw yesterday builds for our children, grandchildren, and those yet unborn, because even today, we are fighting for things that we were fighting for in 1963, 64, 65, and 68. So today could not only be landmark as we do this, it could propel us for the future that every little girl will then believe that she can soar.
And believe me, as an immigrant poor kid, I can relate.
And
It was a very touching moment yesterday.
Let me just quickly say this, because we talk about the rule of law. I think you also have to look at judicial temperament. And what you saw yesterday, beyond her talking about her early childhood, was her response to the tough questions, maybe I think some unfair questions. You saw judicial temperament.
Exactly. Thank you. Dean Goldboff, we know that many of the Supreme Court decisions are unanimous or pretty close to that, but then we're seeing more and more 5-4 or 6-3 decisions. And as I said, we have a very, in my view, an ideologically divided court. And you were asked earlier what the impact of these kinds of split decisions, especially in areas of voting rights, LGBTQ plus rights, abortion rights, workers' rights, union rights. These are the most consequential kind of cases where we can expect more split decisions. Judge Jackson was asked repeatedly about her judicial philosophy, and she does have one. It has to do with her methodology. I wanted to ask you, do you think all of our justices should view themselves as originalists?
I think every justice has to read the Constitution as they think they should. I think they have to be committed to the Constitution and committed to the judicial role in the constitutional scheme, but I do not personally think that everyone has to have the same approach to the Constitution.
I agree with you, because as an example of an originalist, if we were to follow Justice Scalia's view of originalism, we would not have same-sex marriage in our country, because the Obergefell case would have been decided very differently under Justice Scalia's view of originalism. And in fact, Justices Thomas and Alito, also originalists, and in their view, they've already signaled that they would like to revisit Obergefell. I think the LGBTQ plus community is very, very concerned about that. For Mr. Henderson, thank you very much also for being here. You represent an organization deeply committed to protecting the rights and civil liberties of all Americans. What would you tell Americans who want to know if a future Justice Jackson will stand up for them and protect their rights?
Thank you for the thank you for the question, Senator. Let me say, I begin first with Judge Jackson's preparation for the role that she hopefully is about to assume. And you've heard both in the days that she testified and again today how exemplary her credentials are, how she has prepared herself in a way that was really destined for this moment. She has the embodiment of fairness and judicial temperament. She brings a level of excellence and preparation unparalleled in the appointment of Supreme Court justices. There is a deep sense of commitment to fairness that she exudes, both in her writings as a judge, but also in her daily interactions, both on and off the court. There is a fundamental sense of inherent fairness that she certainly embodies. And I think all Americans and persons who are not American citizens but are in this country are guaranteed that she will approach the Constitution with fairness and will approach the individual circumstances of the cases before her. I think that's all we could possibly ask a justice to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, over the last 3 days, we've heard over and over again, as we should, about the incredible qualifications that Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson has to serve on the Supreme Court. And I know I've touted them each and every day of this hearing myself. Hopefully you've seen me do it if you've been watching the hearings, and I'm going to do it again here in a minute. But before I do, I want to explain why I'm doing it, why I keep doing it. It's because I do believe every American should know Ketanji Brown Jackson, the judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the person, and the fact that she represents the very best of our country. That she's not just qualified, but extraordinarily qualified to serve on the Supreme Court of the United States. And because of her qualifications and with her experiences, professional and life experiences that she brings, she will make the Supreme Court better. And she will make our country better. So it is my sincere desire that for anybody watching these proceedings from the audience here in this room or from home or online, if you take nothing else away from these last 4 days, it's Judge Jackson's qualifications. A public school education followed by degrees from Harvard College and Harvard Law School. Clerkships at the Federal District Court, at the Federal Court of Appeals, and the United States Supreme Court. 2 years as a federal public defender. 2 years as a staff member of the United States Sentencing Commission and 4 years as its vice chair. 3 separate confirmations by the United States Senate, each time on a bipartisan basis, including 2 lifetime judicial appointments. Nearly a decade of judicial experience, which is more than the combined total of 4 of the currently sitting justices at the time that they were nominated. And of course, the life experience as a Black woman, as a working mom, and so much more. But it's not just her resume and background that makes Judge Jackson so qualified to serve on the Supreme Court. We've all seen over the last 3 days, how she answered every question and met every unfounded, unfair, and insulting accusation with a level of grace, dignity, and patience that very, very few of us would be able to demonstrate under similar circumstances. And she demonstrated that she's sharp and thoughtful in her responses to legal questions. And she clearly has an understanding of and a commitment to the rule of law and the principle of equal justice. Now, based on her background, her experiences, and her qualifications, in my view, Judge Jackson merits strong bipartisan support from this committee and from the Senate as a whole. My question is this, and I address it to Congresswoman Beatty and to Mr. Henderson. For those who are concerned about the politicization of the Supreme Court towards one end of the spectrum or the other, what would it say to the country if even someone with Judge Jackson's background, experiences, and qualifications cannot earn bipartisan support from the Senate?
Thank you so much, Senator. I think it would be a sad day in America. As my friend and colleague Wayne Henderson said earlier, when we look at this confirmation and we look at voting rights and when we look at all the things that you are debating today, it is the fundamental grounding of our society and our communities. So I think today, how can you say on both sides of the aisle, as Senator Tillis looked at me and said, he and his colleagues agree that she is exceptionally qualified. Then we have heard about the cases that have been brought before us that have been in question by some of my colleagues on the other side. 10 cases, but it was 5, but they were still within the rule of the law that she was given to deal with. So if you look at all the charts that we've seen, with all the boxes to be checked, more than any other justice that some of the same people here have voted for and confirmed when questions about cases in the same vein have appeared, she still is above all of them. So the answer to that question is, how can we not? And as a Black woman who've lived through civil rights and everything else, let's send the right message. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson.
Senator Padilla, your question is so powerful, particularly after you restated, as you did so eloquently, all of the factors that have brought Judge Jackson to this moment. Her background is absolutely extraordinary, and her demonstration and mastery of the law is second to none. If someone, an American citizen, who has overcome the challenges in one's life that she has overcome, demonstrated her ability beyond any reasonable doubt, and is unable to get the bipartisan support of members of this committee, indeed it is a sad day for this country. The signal that it sends to the American people is that at the end of the day, preparation may not be the standard by which you are measured, and instead something else, intangible perhaps, in this process comes through. That's not what we want for America. That's not what we in the civil rights movement have struggled for our professional lives to help bring to this country. It would be a sad day. My hope is that the partisan considerations that may have affected some in the questioning of Judge Jackson will be set aside, and that members of this committee, out of their love for the country and its people and the future of the court, will do what's right and will make Judge Jackson a unanimously confirmed appointment. Now, I'm dreaming, that's not going to happen. But certainly, I think sending a signal to the country that indeed we recognize the qualifications that she brings to the table and we lift them up in the name of the American people is something that I hope we can all do. Thank you.
Senator Ossoff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Grassley. Thank you all for your testimony today and for your work. I take very seriously my constitutional obligations and responsibilities with respect to advice and consent on behalf of my constituents in Georgia, and want to just engage you and interrogate the work that you've done and the conclusions that you've drawn. First of all, you are here under oath, correct?
We are.
Yes.
Yes.
And you conducted a robust review of the nominee's professional record, correct?
Yes.
Right.
You interviewed colleagues, you interviewed counsel who had argued cases before her, correct?
Yes.
Right.
You convened reading groups who undertook a comprehensive review of her published decisions, is that correct?
Yes.
did.
Please, Judge Williams, what were your conclusions with respect to the nominee's reputation for integrity?
Outstanding, excellent, superior, superb. Those were the comments of virtually everyone we interviewed.
And Judge, that is substantial praise. I want to just clarify, you're not here in an advocacy role or a partisan role, correct?
No, we're not. We are doing peer review, which means we get all the information. That's our job, to get the information and then to relay that information to the Senate Judiciary Committee as it applies to the standards that we use to measure a nominee.
As the organization has undertaken such reviews of past nominees nominated by presidents of both parties, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Veda, if I might, what were your conclusions regarding Judge Jackson's professional competence based on this review?
My conclusions are that she has the highest degree of professional competence and is admired by both the bench and bar with her, as a result of her keen intellect, her strong analytical skills, and the clarity and sophistication in her writing.
Thank you. Mr. Drayton, you also undertook, as part of this review and analysis based on these interviews, based on the review of the nominee's record, an assessment of her overall professional competence and qualifications, correct?
Correct.
And what were your conclusions?
She's of the highest stature when it comes to professional competence.
Thank you, Mr. Drayton. What were the conclusions of the reading groups, Judge Williams, that were convened to assess her decisional history?
I'll let Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Drayton, please.
focus on that, but it was of the highest caliber.
Correct. The reading groups found that her writing was impressive. She was meticulous. She considered all arguments. She made a roadmap of her arguments that the layperson could understand. They looked at her reversals, and they found that she was reasonable. They found that she took sound legal positions in novel areas of law. They also looked at how she also had her record supported by the Supreme Court in one of her reversals. And so the reading group, who are top legal minds in the United States, felt that she was a phenomenal writer, and they thought that she was well qualified, in their opinions, based on her writings, to be a part of the United States Supreme Court.
Thank you, Mr. Drayton. And my final question, if we might just move down the bench, beginning with you, Ms. Veda, please. Did your organization encounter in the course of this review any derogatory information, any testimony that raised any serious questions about the nominee's integrity, qualifications, or impartiality?
We did not.
Absolutely nothing.
Not a thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.